back to movementprofessional.com. So today we're going to go over prone variations for ground mobility. So we're starting here in the prone on elbows position, which is promoting a little bit more lumbar extension, but we're starting to mitigate that lumbar extension. We're going to put 2 RX pads under the abdomen, which puts us in a little bit more flexion or back to neutral, as opposed to just being purely prone on elbows. And then you can see we could take 1 pad away and just decrease the amount of support to gradually improve or increase the lumbar extension, at least in the lumbar spine. So generally the prone position is going to promote more extension, and as we flatten out, it'll actually open up the hips for people that don't even realize that even when they walk around they don't find full hip extension or a neutral posture. So prone is actually a good way to get people to just experience full hip extension or to work towards it. So I still have the RX pad under the hips, so I'm not actually going into full hip extension yet or the full position of prone. So if there are some issues with getting into lumbar extension and then it has to be done gradually, the simple way to do that is just to add some type of support under the hips and pelvis. Alright, so the next position we're going into is an X position, or you can call it like a overhead straddle position in prone. Alright, so we want to just own the position first without any type of lifting. So we just get into the position, reach the fingers away from the toes. I have the insides of my feet touching the ground, which promotes more hip external rotation to just promote that. And then I can activate the position by lifting the legs, and then separately I can also lift the arms, or I can lift them together. And I can manipulate pillars of support in really any way I want to. So if I have both hands down and both feet down, I have 4 pillars of support down. I can lift one arm, I can lift one arm, one leg. I can do opposites, I can do same side. But I can manipulate that position a little bit as long as I can tolerate being in that position. So once I know that I can tolerate being in a prone position with support, I just take the support away, and then I can explore some other prone positions without any support under the pelvis. So this was just a full overhead position, hands touching to assess overhead flexion. And you can see the line of the body in a prone position doesn't necessarily assess full overhead flexion because my shoulder is still lower than my ear, but I can use some feedback from the ground to help me work into some of the limitations I might feel there. So when I'm in that overhead prone position, I could be working on taking some of the extension out of my back, bracing, bringing my ribs down, and I can do that also when I get into that X position that I was in when I had pelvic support. Alright, so these different positions in prone can really just help assess what your hip mobility is, what your shoulder mobility is. It just gives you feedback from the ground to tell you where your spinal position is. So this is a hands behind head frog position in prone, which is bringing your hips into flexion, abduction, external rotation, as well as the shoulders into the same. And we can do that in an overhead position with the same hip position of the frog. And then from there, we're going to look to affect overhead position a little bit more. So now we know that we can tolerate being in prone with different arm and leg positions without any support. Now we're actually going to assist the overhead position and add a little bit of range of motion to the position. Alright, so before, when we were in prone, you could see that the shoulders weren't quite lining up with the ears, so I wasn't attaining the full overhead position. Now this time, if I elevate my shoulders on a yoga block, you can see my ear disappears. So now I'm at least getting the full overhead. You can see the compensation that wants to happen now is my thoracic spine stays in a kyphotic flexion, and my lumbar spine is going to want to go into more lordosis or extension. So I'm going to want to maintain a brace in my abdominals to prevent hyperextension in the lumbar spine. And then I can go up even higher. It's important when you're using the blocks to make sure that the blocks are above the elbow or closer to the shoulder than the elbow, just so you don't have any compensation with elbow bend. And now I will have a much greater stretch in the shoulder extensors, particularly the lats, as I get my arms overhead there, and I just have to create again a brace to prevent hyperextension in the lumbar spine, and also try to maintain hip extension by keeping glutes, adductor magnus, that area active throughout the movement. Breathing is really important when I'm holding this position because I can inhale, fill the lower belly, exhale, drop my ribs down, activate through the hip extensors, and you'll just feel so much feedback into this stretch. And you can spend more time there because you're basically in a position of rest and just adding progressively more assistance into the overhead position. All right, and that's really important when you're trying to improve mobility, that you can spend time in the position comfortably and not feel like you're in survival mode, but you can actually breathe there and explore the position for a little bit of time. So I think one of the basic rules of thumb with improving mobility is you actually got to spend some time in the positions that you're trying to mobilize. So ground mobility is phenomenal for that because it's basically a position of rest that you can explore progressively more assistance into positions, but you can really feel what your body's ready for and what it's not ready for, and progress that. So you also get a lot of feedback for if you move your arms into a certain position, what the resultant effect is on the spine and lower down, and you can create muscle contractions and stability cues to counter the compensatory effects of what's going on down further in the chain. All right, so this would be the fullest overhead position, at least using yoga blocks, to get the arms into kind of a hyperflexion. And again, we really are going to have to brace lower down in that core region to prevent too much hyperextension through there or any type of lower back compression force. Okay, you can also add a little bit of opening and closing of the hands to try to create a little bit of rotator cuff activation. There is a connection between grip and rotator cuff strength, so just by making a fist with my hand, that can activate my shoulders in a different manner. One of the other values of working in the prone position is that gravity is working as a resistor to the muscles of the posterior chain. So whenever you create any type of lifting, you're getting some resisting from gravity. So it helps to strengthen the muscles of the posterior chain or the muscles of the thoracic region. All right, so that is prone variations for ground mobility. If you have any questions, you can go to movementprofessional.com. I'll see you next time.